Staff.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the welcome and the introduction. President Peter, fellow Rotarians, thank you all for having me. As you've grown accustomed, Mark has close ties with Guyana and of course with the Rotary Club of Garden City. And I'm happy that he's invited me once again to share fellowship and to discuss a topical issue in Guyana, which I hope you all find very interesting. With your permission, I'd like to share my screen for a couple images I wanted to incorporate.
You should be good, Ronald.
So I hope it's visible. So
Yes, sir.
All right, wonderful. So the image you see is a map showing an overlay of a portion of Venezuela in yellow and a portion of Guyana with white and orange stripes. The area in white and orange stripes is known in Venezuela as the Guyana-Essequibo, which is an area they hope one day to recover from Guyana. The area is quite large. It comprises about 2/3 of Guyana's territory. It's an area that is rich in minerals, forests, agricultural land, and is also probably severely underpopulated. Population density is pretty low. This is what it looks like with a map that shows it relative to the rest of Guyana. As you can see, it's vast. The number of displaced persons isn't large, probably about 50,000. But its significance in recent years has shifted from the actual value of the land territory to the area that it would comprise in terms of our exclusive economic zone offshore. This is the size of Venezuela. It's a pretty large country. The issue really isn't the space. It's about 6 times the size of Georgia and twice the size of California. And this is Guyana relative to the eastern coast of the United States, significantly smaller. The Venezuelan population is about 30 million people. Guyana's is under a million on its best day. If you include the diaspora, maybe double that, but a very small population. The significance of it, of course, in terms of the size of the economy and military expenditure is an interesting story as well. Venezuela's military expenditure in 2019 was about $7.5 billion US. Guyana's military expenditure is under $100 million. It's not likely to increase a whole lot more. Of course, given the size of the population, the military personnel and other resources is vastly different. The importance of this, of course, is that military conflict is always a great possibility, and it would not be very difficult for Venezuela to take it by force, given the current international climate. It has never been an issue that's far from possibility. But this is where the story has changed in recent years. Some of you may know that Guyana has recently been the subject of significant oil discoveries since 2015. A large US operator, ExxonMobil, in partnership with Hess, which is a British firm, and a Chinese firm, have a joint venture where they obtain the rights to what's called the Stabroek Block. It's located 120 miles offshore of Guyana, and it's pretty large, 26,000 square kilometers. The importance to Venezuela is really unclear. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. It will not finish, no matter what they do in this lifetime or the next. The world is going to stop using oil before Venezuela runs out of oil. Guyana's oil deposits are significant, and it's extremely valuable. It's easy to access. It's high quality, and Exxon is, of course, thrilled to bits. As you can see, the area immediately north of the Essequibo region is where the dispute would become important. I mean, the value of the oil resources is 100 times the value of the land, at least based on what the world values right now. Those are the the current issues that make this a very important and topical issue. The particular matter I hope to discuss with you this morning relates to the legal claim that's currently pending before the International Court of Justice between Guyana and Venezuela. This matter was settled in 1899 in an arbitration that took place in Paris, which comprised of distinguished arbitrators, 2 American jurists, 2 British jurists, and a Russian jurist. And they agreed on where the border should be. The British who controlled Guyana, of course, at the time, wanted it a significant distance to the west at the mouth of the Orinoco. Venezuela wanted it further to the east, where the line currently is. And the tribunal found that the border should be somewhere in the middle. Coming out of the colonial era, Venezuela was closely aligned with the US and was confident that the US would protect its interests. The Russian jurist who was the president of the tribunal was highly respected, considered one of the world's leading authorities on international law. And immediately after the decision was given, Venezuela was quite thrilled with it. They praised it as being a very good decision. They expressed no dissatisfaction about the outcome. And this continued from about 1899 throughout the 30s, 40s, up until the time of Guyana's independence. In 1962, Venezuela started to express dissatisfaction with the result. And this, of course, was shortly around the time of Guyana's independence. As Prime Minister Hines was telling you a few weeks ago, Chelly Jagan, who was the premier of Guyana in the early 60s, was committed and open communist, perhaps a bit too open about his communist inclinations at the time, which caused great concern among the Americans and the British. His wife, of course, was an American woman who was far more communist than he ever was. And I think it spooked the Americans and the British. But notwithstanding that, they thought it was still important not to give in to Venezuela's claims. But in the period around independence, they agreed to set up a committee to review it, to try to resolve it through diplomatic means. Those diplomatic means included Good Offices project by the Secretary General of the United Nations, which continued from 1962 up until about 2012, when he accepted that it was going nowhere. Guyana, of course, the timing coincided with the discovery of oil, decided to refer the dispute to the International Court of Justice. The basis of Venezuela's objection started in around 1944, where they relied on a document that was authored by an American man by the name of Servo Mallet Provost. Mr. Mallet Provost was an American lawyer who had served as junior counsel to Venezuela 45 years earlier, in 1899, when the tribunal sat. And a memorandum was published on his death in the July 1949 issue of the American Journal of International Law, where he didn't identify, but he alleged that the conspiracy between the British and the Russian jurists on the panel to render a decision that was not based on a sincere interpretation of the facts and the law, but was a political decision meant to satisfy the British government. This memorandum had been known to Venezuela from the time of its publication in the 40s, but they didn't do much about it until the dispute really started gaining traction in the period before Guyana's independence. As you can imagine, the threat of Venezuelan aggression has loomed beneath the surface continuously for the past 60 years. It presents a bit of an existential threat for Guyana. At various times, it becomes more of an important issue. Venezuela, the area of Venezuela that borders Guyana is similarly underpopulated and very, very much rural and very rough terrain. It's as lawless as you can imagine. I mean, short of an area of open warfare. But there's a lot of mining, there's a lot of smuggling, human trafficking, drug smuggling, abuse by military and police, probably on both sides of the border. it's a difficult place to live. And Venezuela encourages drug gangs and criminal gangs to make incursions into Guyana's territory, and they hold a small amount of territory in a hostile manner, which has no major practical significance, but it is continuous aggression. Strangely, however, we maintain very friendly relations. There are exchange visits by late President Chavez, and the two countries have significant areas of cooperation in relation to the export of agricultural produce from Guyana, and also extremely generous support from Hugo Chavez in the form of fuel and energy during periods of crisis in the 2010s. Nobody on this side believes that Venezuela is serious, except that they actually are serious. It's probably the only thing that Venezuelans on either side of the political divide agree on. And it translates into very weird skirmishes. For example, whenever maps of the area is posted on social media, you'll see Guyanese and Venezuelans yelling at each other in the vilest of language about who is right and wrong. The case has been going pretty well. Venezuela initially refused to participate, but they've recently joined in. The main thrust of their legal argument is that the tribunal does not have jurisdiction because it's an issue that has to include the British government. Guyana's case is that the British government has long renounced any interest in the outcome of the case. They don't hold any territory. They have no legal, practical, or other interest in the outcome, and therefore it should proceed. Of course, we feel confident, but one never knows with these things. If the case doesn't lead to a ruling in our favor, the parties, of course, will have to revert to diplomacy, which is quite unsatisfactory. Of course, we all hope that given our newfound oil discoveries and our recent closeness with the US government, that this offers some amount of a buffer against Venezuelan aggression or threats. In the past, Venezuela has used its military to harass Guyanese fishermen and smaller vessels operating off that were supporting oil exploration. It has not happened for quite some time, given the value of US assets and the number of American citizens who are operating offshore. It's reasonable to expect that the Venezuelan military is unlikely to threaten those. But that creates all sorts of other practical issues back here on land. I know that you take your time very seriously. I think I'll stop there and leave the window open for any questions that you may have.